Take one. Hello, this is Sophie Lawson from sophielawson.com, and this is episode 252 of the Sophie Art Podcast, which is a little podcast I do about the art and tings with my co-host lilDENNiS. And lilDENNiS is with us today, and today we are going to be doing another Dump and Doodle, and this one's going to be all about time. So what I do on these is I just do a brain dump about a topic whilst doing some doodling, because what I've noticed is if you're talking about something and you're doing like doodling, sometimes more information comes out in the doodle than the words. Yeah, this is quite weird, but lilDENNiS is going to get us straight into this one. Boing! So lilDENNiS is going in his little kitty kisses. They're going into their little house. Well, actually, yeah, they're going to be kissing in their house today, I think. So this one, I've got loads of topics. Well, loads of discussion points, I suppose. So I'll just go through some of the things I'm thinking about, because time fascinates me. Even since a very little child, I was thinking about time. There's something about it, because we're inside of something. We're inside of time, but if it's possible to get outside of it, then all of a sudden it becomes paradoxical. So it's quite interesting to think about it. That's what I think. But some of the things I'm thinking about is remote viewing, being outside of time, is the dream realm outside of time, something to do with the physical body being almost like locked into time. And I'm going to talk about how I think time's speeding up, space, time, position points. So it's almost like you could have, this is what I think would explain spirits. You could have two people or two beings existing at the same point in space, but a slightly different bit of time. So it's almost like they're on top of each other in space, but they can still be occupying a different. It's almost like that point that space becomes it's almost like time almost becomes like a physical thing when you think about it like that. Time travel. If you could stop time, what would you do? I haven't thought about that yet. Would you rather go into the past or the future? And I'm also going to talk about this thing. What I've been wanting to do in a dream is I want to experience timelessness in a dream. But I thought to myself, if you can experience timelessness in a dream, does that not mean you could be trapped in that dream if there's no time? It's quite weird. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get straight into my little sketchbook. So the first thing I thought was, the reason I put remote viewing down is because I was thinking, when you're doing doodling, like I said, sometimes information comes out in the doodle. And what happened one time, I thought about this morning. This one time at band camp, what it was, when the lockdown thing happened, me Reiki healer started doing sessions on the computer instead of in person. So I did one session on the computer, and for me there's something about having the physical contact I think is quite important with Reiki healing. But what happened was, whilst we were talking to each other on the computer, on the screen, and whilst we were talking, I had a piece of paper and I was doodling. And what happened was, she obviously saw that I was doodling, and she said we were talking about something, and I was trying to explain something. I was struggling with something. I can't remember what it was. And she said, "Show me what you've just doodled." And what I had doodled was like a sphere inside of a cube. And she said, she basically said that little doodle I had done shows what I'm feeling, which is I felt like I was trapped in a cube. So she took it that I was like a sphere, and I felt like I was trapped in a box or something. And when she done that, I thought, wow, this shows how sort of because what happens is it's almost like your hand is sort of, when you're doodling, it's like you're speaking without words. And the thing is, there's some stuff, like when you go into the psychedelic realm or something, you can experience stuff that you can't explain in words. So this is why I feel like sometimes art is the best way of sort of expressing things, because you can feel things. Even if you can't explain it, you can feel it. And what I thought of this morning was this remote viewing, because one of the things I like to do is, if I'm going to do a topic, so this one's about time, what I want to do is I'm just going to pick up my pen and scribble what I think time is. And that's quite interesting. A little heart come out. What I scribbled was it's almost like an upside down heart with like a line coming off of it. But what happened is, if you've ever looked into remote viewing, it's a skill that can be learnt. And the Farsight Institute do this. He gave out Courtney Brown. He's got on his website. He's got a load of sort of like documents you can read about how to learn remote viewing. And one of the things they do is they say about this thing where, because what happens is each object you're remote viewing. Oh, my pen's run out. Yeah. Each subject you're remote viewing is given like a. Oh, I do actually want a black pen because. Oh, I need to find another black pen now. Where's my other? There it is. What they say is, when you're doing remote viewing, you don't know what you're remote viewing. So what remote viewing is you can project your awareness into any point in space and time and observe things, almost like when you're going out of body. This is why I think everything's all sort of linked to the same. Everything's telling us the same thing. It's just all different ways of accessing it. But what he said, when you get your subject, your target, because all you're given is a bunch of numbers, and those numbers like correlate to the thing. So say somebody wants you to remote view the pyramids. What they'll do is they'll create a number like 2, 6, 4, 9, and then what they'll do is they'll give you that number. So all your remote viewing is the number, and they've associated the pyramid with the number, but you don't know that. So all you've got is the number. So what he said was, what happens is one of the first things they do is they just empty their mind and focus on this number, and then they let their hand draw what their number is, what they're feeling from the number. And so what it is certain shapes represent different things, and I can't remember what they are, but like one of them, for instance, represents like a land. So in other words, you can start, you're just letting your hand scribble, but then what will happen is you can look at that scribble and say, this line here represents a structure. So you know you're dealing with structures, and a different shape will represent like people or beings or something. So it's almost like your hand through the scribble is telling you what you're remote viewing. It's amazing. But I also thought to myself, remote viewers are basically taking themselves out of time. So like when we're in a physical body, it's almost like I was thinking this morning, I feel like we're actually trapped. I feel like the physical body is the thing that's trapping us in time. So what it makes me think is, when you go to sleep at night and you become your spirit body, is that spirit body basically, is that the process of you detaching yourself from time? But then because we've got a silver cord attached to us, it's almost like the silver cord, you could look at the silver cord as like a chain that's like keeping us locked into time or something. So the first thing I thought to myself was, remote viewers are actually, in a weird way, they're almost like time travellers. And I also thought time travelling, I always imagine like time travelling is going to be, you're going to step into a little time machine and go like that. But time travelling might actually all be in the mind. So you could even say we're already time travelling just by existing. Yeah, it's quite funny. So then you start to think to yourself as well, what if the human body, what if some, like God or something, or the creator, or whatever it is, they create these physical bodies, put the consciousness inside of it, but the physical bodies are time machines. So, because if whatever we really are is outside of time, then there's no time. So you're just existing. But to be inside of time, you need a physical body. That's what I'm wondering if that's what's happening. So then, what that means really, the physical body is like a time machine. It's taking you through time. Huh. That's quite funny. But have you ever tried to think about being outside of time? I remember when I was little, when I was a child, I'd sometimes sit there, sort of thinking to myself about time, and I would try with all my imagination or something. I would focus on time and really focus on like the thought of time not existing but you still existing. And what can happen, I've talked about this before, I haven't done this for ages, but as a child I used to be able to somehow get myself to the point where I could feel myself existing without time. But as soon as I realised that I was doing that, I'd be back in time again. But for those brief split second, I could feel what if I could feel existing without time. But again, it's one of these things you can't even explain it. You can't even consciously think about it, because the minute you put your consciousness on it to try to work it out, you're sort of back in time again. That's what I'm thinking. So then the other thing I was thinking is the dream realm outside of time? And like, is the physical body locked into time? So if this is what's going on, this would be amazing. Because what it means is, at night time, we're basically free from time. So what that means is, like, at night time you could be going into the past, potentially changing something, so that it's almost like I start wondering to myself, like these synchronicities that happen, could it possibly be it's you in the dream realm putting things in place for yourself? So it's almost like you in the future, you're going into the dream realm, going back in time, putting like objects into the physical world, so that the you that existed then interacts with them. So, because then the other thing is then, what version of you is that in the future? What if it's a different, like what if there's infinite versions of you all existing, and one of them in the future works out that if it had say, well, like what I talked about last week, being strangled as a child, maybe there's a version of me in the future that was in prison because it didn't get strangled, and it was sitting in prison thinking about its life, and it thought to itself, if only something could have stopped this situation from happening in my childhood. So what it does is it went back in time, and it basically took me out of that environment. It created a situation to put me out of that environment. So then what happens is, the me that is existing in this lifetime, it's a me from the future in a different lifetime that created that situation for me in this lifetime, so that I can be a different version of me in the future. because otherwise I would have ended up being that other version. That's what I'm thinking. And then I'm also thinking that the dream realm is something to do with time. Now, the other thing is, when I did I've only ever done psychedelics once, and what happened was it said two things that stuck in my mind. It said, we are all characters. We are all characters in a story. Almost as if, like, it's not real. Don't take nothing seriously, really. And the other thing is, DNA is time slowed down. Time slowed down. So even that is sort of saying the physical body's got the DNA in it. So again, what if it's the physical body that's slowing time down? Well, again, it's almost like saying that the DNA is time slowed down. It's almost as if the DNA itself is like time or something. Because the other thing is, what time DNA looks like? Doesn't DNA look like the infinite sign or something? Infinity. It's some sort of squiggly thing. So what if DNA is actually like a timeline of, in other words, each human, like the lifetime, when you're born, when you die, what if the DNA is like the storybook, so that your life is captured as a story inside of this DNA. And then, so if there's another version of you on a different timeline, that one would have another bit of DNA, which would be its story. But then if you zoomed out far enough, what would happen is there'd be like this massive bit of DNA which would have both bits in it. So in a strange way, none of these DNA bits are separate. It's just like each person is experiencing a part of a bigger story or something. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. But like, I've got this feeling the physical body is locked inside of time. And then the other thing I was thinking about, which I've talked about this on a podcast as well, I really feel like time is speeding up. And, well, the other thing is, well, like a squiggly line, if you look at a squiggly line from a different perspective, it can look like a what would you call that? Like a sort of a vortex, I suppose. This is the thing. Like, things from different angles look different. But like if you put water down a sink, if you could somehow slow it down, you would sort of see it going like faster and faster to the bit when it pops down the hole in the middle. So the little thought I had was just this: is it possible that what's happening is, as we go further through time, it's like we're getting closer to the end point. As you get closer to the end point, it's like the end point's sucking you in. And that sucking you in is actually speeding up time. Almost like a black hole. If you go into a black hole, I would imagine like time's getting sucked into it. But I have heard this thing about if you could somehow go into a black hole, there's a point where you would be. It's something like. Can you hear that? Fire alarms. There's a point at the black hole where you can actually. Oi, stop it! There's a point at the black hole where I think it's something like you would be able to see yourself going inside the black hole or something. It's something like that. Or if somebody was outside looking in, I can't remember now, but what happens is time gets manipulated inside of this like event horizon or something. So my question is, what's going on inside of a black hole? What's happening to time inside of the black hole? Is inside of the black hole timeless? So therefore everything's existing simultaneously, which again, this is what would explain that thing about the way I see time is like, I feel like time is sort of like, let's say you got space so you got the X and the Y and the Z axes, and each point in space has like a number. So 111 would be one point in space, and then there's like 121 would be right next to it, and then 112 would be next to it in a different axis or something. But then what you've got this thing called time, which is like a variable which has got, so each variable of time has got inside of it the coordinates of space. It's like an array in a computer program. So what happens is, inside of the black hole, it's almost like inside of the black hole, every single possible bit of space is existing at the same time, but it's like on top of itself. So you could have everything existing. I feel like you could have everything existing on top of itself, like layers, like sheets of paper. So let's say there's a little person on the sheet of paper, and there's another person on the sheet below it. It's like they're separate, but all the pieces of paper are together. So then what happens then is, if one of these little people could sort of cross over into these other sheets of paper, that's what I think like spirits would be. It's somehow things that have gone from one sheet of paper to another sheet of paper. So like if you was on that sheet, it's very much like that thing about if you was a little creature on a 2D world, if a 3D object comes into the 2D world, like a sphere, all it sees is a circle. So like, that's what I'm thinking. Like a spirit, you don't see with spirits or something, you're not seeing the whole physical body. It's like you're seeing a slice of the being, which is like this ghost thing. So it's not actually physical, but it is existing though. I don't know where that space-time position points. So then time travel. Well, again, I think like we are time travelling. But the other thing is, this is what I love trying to. This is what I was trying to think about as a child. So I'm inside of this time. Like the way I see it is like bubble. It's like I thought about this morning walking to work. I looked up at the sky, and you can see all the stars. And it looked like an ocean. It looked like an ocean of little bubbles. So each star was like a bubble inside of like an ocean of water or something. And I was thinking, what if each of these little bubbles is like a pocket of time, and the water is almost like the timelessness. So if you could get yourself far enough outside of this bubble, which I think that would to me like be like all your planets and stuff inside of this like bubble. If you could get yourself outside of it into the nothingness, I was just wondering if that would be like some sort of timelessness thing. But then the other thing is as well, like if we look up at the sky, we're sort of looking into the past, because the speed of light is such that the object you're looking at in the sky, in other words, you could look at a star in the sky, but it's actually already died. It doesn't exist anymore, because the time it takes for that light to reach you is so long that the object itself could have disappeared. So even there, it's almost like just looking up at the sky, it's like we're looking into the past. So what I'm thinking is, if you can project yourself free from your body, is that going faster than the speed of light? And maybe that's what that sensation is, because what happens is sometimes when I'm going out of body, I can put my energy into the top of my head, and it's zooming and the G-force, and it's almost like unbearably exciting. But maybe that's going faster than the speed of light or something. So then the point then is, you'd be teleporting. So if you can teleport, if remote viewers can teleport, then there's this drawing exercise where you draw 2 dots, and then what you got to do is you got to try and match the line. I missed it. What you do is, it's a good drawing exercise. This, you got 2 dots. You got to try and I didn't do it. Yay! You can like practice capturing the 2 dots. It could stop time. Yeah, if you could stop time, what would you do? If I could stop time, what would I do? So what would happen is you would stop time, but you would still be able to move. So in other words, you could like be on the earth, you could stop time, so everything's stopped, but you can still move around. What would I do? The first thing I'd do, I think I'd walk on water. That'd be cool. Yeah, because the water would be solid. This is the thing, you see. It's spinning. It's spinning that creates solid stuff. So, like, I said this ages ago. Like, spinning seems to be the key to everything. If you take spin, because like atoms are spinning, planets are spinning. It's almost like if everything stops spinning. Because I wonder whether time is this. If time is spinning, maybe it's that time that's causing everything else to spin. So, like in the timelessness, maybe nothing's spinning. This might explain why in the dream realm, if you look at something too long, it starts to shake, almost as if it's almost like it's not really there. It's like it's pretending to be there, and you looking at it you're showing that it's not actually spinning. It's the other thing as well about like light switches don't work as well. Like it's almost like the dream realm is made of cardboard. That's what it's like. The dream realm. Sometimes I think the dream realm is like a set on a theatre. And what happens is, if you start poking around at it, you realise it's all pretend. And that's when it starts to fall apart. So for the most part, we're walking around this like set on this theatre in the dream realm, thinking it's all real. But then the other thing is, because have you ever had this thought? I used to work nights at this. I'd walk home at like 1 o'clock in the morning, and sometimes it's all dark. Sometimes you'd walk past a house with a light on in like the bedroom, and I thought to myself, is there really somebody inside that house, or is everything just like very much like what I was saying about this, it all being like a pretend environment? What if what's happened is the lights are there just to make you think that there's a house there with somebody in it. So if you actually went inside, there would be nothing inside. But what would happen is, the moment you went inside, there would be something inside, because what happens is the reality shapes it and shifts itself. So in other words, wherever you go, reality is creating itself for you. So if you go in that house, there's someone in there. But if you never go in that house, really, there's nothing there. It's just a picture of a house with the illusion of being someone inside, like holograms. Because if you think about it, really, we've got this massive world, but we really only ever like sort of explore this tiny little piece. It reminds me of like the Truman Show. So how do you not know that? Like, how do you not know that everything's just being created, rendered for you? That's what I'm thinking. But if I could stop time, what would I do? I'd walk on water. I would love to go up to the like animals, like really like snakes or something, and just sit there and be able to look at them up close and sort of like feel the texture and look into their eyes and stuff, and then go up to animals and feel their fur and stuff. Like all these like animals that you could never go up to because they're too dangerous. You could go up and really look at them. Imagine that though, you like touch one and it brings it to life. That'd be cool. Yeah, imagine that. That would be a bit sad actually. Have you ever had... I've got loads of thoughts in my head. I had this dream once where I was in a dream and my sister was there, but she couldn't hear me, and it felt like I was a ghost in that dream, and I was like talking to her, but she couldn't see me. And it reminded me a little bit of that. Like you'd be going up to this snake or something, looking into its eyes, but it can't see you. But then the other thing is, what if it could see you? Because like there's these people in comas they look like they're just doing nothing, but they can actually still see. So they can like see, but they can't move or say anything. Imagine what that would feel like. That would feel like you're a prisoner in your body there. And I experienced that in a dream once with my sister, which was quite strange. So I think really all I would do is, if I could stop time, I would walk on water, because that would be cool. And also I would go up to like animals and stuff and really study them in detail. That'd be cool. And also you could look at stuff like things like running water and that, because it would all have frozen. That'd be quite cool, I think. And then, would you rather go into the past or the future? Yeah, please. I don't often. Please, like, say in the comments, what would you? If you could stop time, what would you do? And also, would you go into the past or the future? I think I would love to go into the past just to see what was going on with these pyramids. I'm fascinated by that. And I would like to go back to the time of the dinosaurs, because I want to see, because I'm convinced, I'm trying to draw a little dinosaur. I'm convinced that humans and dinosaurs were existing together. And I've got a feeling that these dinosaurs were friendly. So I'd like to go back and see the pyramids and dinosaurs. I'd like to go back in time to the beginning, just to see what happened. And then if I could go into the future, I'd like to see the end, to see what's going to happen. And I would imagine it's going to be the same. Yeah, the beginning and the end will be exactly the same, I bet. Imagine if you went into the future and you saw pyramids and dinosaurs. So in other words, it's almost like the past would just end up being the future. That'd be weird, because you imagine that the future's going to be full of spaceships and things like that. I'll tell you what would be funny, if you went back in time and the past was full of spaceships and like robots and everything, and the future was all rainforests and stuff. That'd be quite funny. And then the other thing is, like, is it possible that somehow... Well, yeah, that is possible. Because what could happen here is, what if in the future we had the pyramids and dinosaurs, some sort of disaster happens or something, and we've got like a time machine, we go back in time... No, wait a minute. No, it'd be the other way around, wouldn't it? Because they would be destroyed. You'd have to go into the future. Because what I was thinking was, what if the pyramids remained... No, there is a way for this to work. It's some sort of thing whereby the remains of the pyramids are from the future. Yeah, that's it. What if the pyramid itself is the time machine? So what happens is, in the future, something happens, we all get inside of this pyramid, which is a time machine. We go back in time, we pop into the past, but we leave behind these pyramids. So all these pyramids that are on the Earth, what they actually are is they're time machines from the future, which we came out of in the past. And what will happen is in the future, we will end up going back into these pyramids, because what will happen is we'll end up regenerating these. We'll get these pyramids working again in the future, which are time machines. So then in the future we'll go back into these pyramids, which they'll end up going back into the past again. Yeah. So like loops. It'll be an endless loop, which is that thing again about this. The start and the end is going to be the same, I bet. But if I had to pick between the past or the future, well, it depends if you're going to stay there or not. If you're going into the past and you can't get back, I would go into the past. Yeah, because I'm led to believe that the past is more organic. So I would like to live in that world. Whereas I've got a feeling the future is going to be all robots. Oh, imagine that though. You go into the past thinking it's all going to be nature, and you end up in like a world of robots, and it ends up being it was actually back to front. It could happen, I suppose, because it could be that these robots in the past create the humans. And then the other thing I was thinking is, if you experience timelessness in a dream, would you be trapped there? I can't quite get my head around this, but in the dream, in like a lucid dream, you can ask the dream to experience things. And I've never got around to doing this, but one of the things I would love to experience, I'd love to ask the dream, can I please experience timelessness? But the thing is, because like Robert Wagner, he says, if something is too extreme in the dream realm, you can ask to experience it for, say, 1 minute. So you can say, "Wait, hey, this is weird. I've got hiccups, like belly things." And I always say, when you're talking about something important, I've noticed you get these internal burps. So Robert Wagner says, what happened is, we've each got this like feeling tone, which to me is like a little like a vibration. Like it's like he says it's like a hum, but we've each got a different one. So that could explain why you relate to certain people, because you've got similar vibrations at the base level sort of thing. But he said sometimes if you want to experience that, it can be so intense that you almost can't handle it. So he said what he does is he says, can I experience it for 1 minute or 10 or 5 seconds, and then after 5 seconds the dream will take you back out. But I thought, well, if you say, can I experience timelessness for 5 seconds, you can't do that. Because the moment if you're in a dream and you put yourself into a state of timelessness, that's it. You can't get out of that. That's what I'm thinking. Because if you say, I want to be in timelessness for 5 seconds, how can you be inside of timelessness for 5 seconds? Because if you're actually inside of the timelessness, then you're going to exist forever. This is something else I thought about this morning as well. What if what's happened is we are like some sort of a ball of energy that is immortal. It can't die. It's outside of time. So it knows it's immortal. So it could experience anything, but it knows it's not. In other words, it could experience getting murdered, but it knows that it's not really going to get murdered. So very much like when you're playing a virtual reality game or something, if you know that the monster's a video game, even though you can be scared of it, if you can just remember that it's a video game, you're not going to be scared of it really, because you know that you can get out of it. So I thought, well, what if this what we really are, wants to experience what it feels like to not be immortal, even though it really is. So what it done was it created this thing called time, and it put itself into this thing called time. And part of that is you forget that you're immortal. So now you're inside of this time thing. So if you get murdered in here, you really think you're going to get murdered. As soon as you got murdered though, you'd pop out and you'd be back as immortal. But for that brief split second, you'd proper feel the fear of getting murdered or something. Or it could be anything. Falling in love. Any emotion. So that's what I'm saying. I think time, like reality to me, is just a bunch of experiences. And like some are negative, some are positive. But really it doesn't matter. Because like they say, as above so below, like they're both the same thing really. Which is just an experience. That's what I'm thinking. So this is actually quite interesting though, because what I'm thinking is when you're dreaming, you're sort of taking yourself out of the box. Yeah, it starts, loads of stuff starts, I start thinking about things like people in comas. What if what's happened is they've detached themselves from time, but they're somehow still, they haven't sort of cut the silver cord. So they're existing in the timelessness, their consciousness is in the timelessness, but they're still attached to their physical body, so their physical body still exists, is still like alive, but they're not there. Because maybe what's happened is they've put themselves in a box inside of the timelessness, separate from their physical body, but they're still attached to their physical body. So for all we know, people in a coma could be experiencing like a 1,000-year lifetime over here. But in their physical body, they're out for say 2 weeks or something in a coma, but they've experienced a lifetime in another box in the timelessness. Because then the other thing is, what we really are, because you hear this thing about we're all the same. So what if all that's happened is, what we really are is a ball of energy, and it's putting itself into these boxes of time, which is a person. So then the other thing then is, yeah, you could experience everything at once, because let's say you've got 100% of consciousness. All you do is you put 1% of consciousness inside of one box, 1% in another box. So what happens is when that physical being dies, that 1% of consciousness goes back into the main consciousness, and then it can go and create another one. But then what I think is this, when you're inside this, what we are, I wonder when we're going into the dream realm, if we've got like 100% of consciousness, which is really only 1% of the main consciousness, when we're in the dream realm, we can start allocating our consciousness into the dream realm. It's like we could have 1% of consciousness in the dream realm and another 1%. But then the other thing is, with this, you could put, what's happening, this is what false awakenings are. Maybe if you're putting 100% consciousness into the dream realm, what's happening is, so what's happened now is, you're inside of the dream realm, you could now start putting your dream consciousness into other like boxes of time inside of the dream realm. So what happens now, this would explain false awakenings to me. What happens is, you're in a dream within a dream, you realise you're dreaming, so you wake yourself up, but you've only woken yourself up into the dream self. So then what happens now is you've also got another part of yourself that's still in another dream. So that's got to wake up. And then finally you can wake yourself up. But then what I'm saying then is, if that's what's happening, it must be possible for us to wake ourselves up from inside of this thing into the base reality being. And then who's not to say that thing itself is part of a bigger one? It's like never-ending. It's never-ending. It could be never-ending consciousness. It could be consciousness getting divided never-endingly. Yeah, and then if you loop that around, one of these could be inside of that. Because all it needs is one of these dream selves to dream of that, the original being, and you've created the loop, which goes back to that thing about if all we are is an immortal being, like a ball of energy, like everything could be inside of this ball of energy. So all of that is actually, all of these dream selves and physical selves are inside of this ball of energy. But even then you have to say, well, what's that inside of? So it's a bit weird because you can't ever... So what I'm thinking is, even when I'm dead, I'm still going to be thinking, what is this? In other words, when you die, if you're aware that you're dead and you still exist, surely you're still going to be asking the question, well, where am I now, sort of thing. In other words, let's say you work out that this is what God is, or the creator, you come back to being the creator, so you've now become conscious that you're the creator. Surely the creator is going to be thinking, well, what created me? And then, so it seems like, see, I can't get my head around that. I can't understand how you're ever going to be able to understand what the original creation is, unless it's looping in on itself, like a big massive paradox thing. But even that, what created that? It's weird. I do like thinking about it though. So that's it for this one, I think. For me, time is one of the best things to think about, because it's probably not possible to understand it. For some strange reason, I feel like you can, even though I think you can't. Part of me thinks you can. lilDENNiS is going to end this one though. Yay! I really hope you enjoyed that. Also, at the moment I'm really into me comic books. And I've been focusing on, because what I do is I go to the comic shop each week and buy comics from the 50p and £1 bins. And if you're into comics, and the good thing is a lot of these comics, especially a lot of the ones I'm getting, they're all to do with like time travel and sort of things like that. So that's one of the things I'm loving about this, because, well, what I said before, we are all characters in a story. Maybe when you zoom out, you realise that we're inside of a comic book. That'd be cool, I think. Yeah, we could. Maybe this is it. I'll tell you what would be cool. Imagine if you was in a manga world. See, that's what I'm thinking. What if when you die, if you can keep your consciousness, what if you can choose, like, the next life? So what you could do is you could say to yourself, because if this is a never-ending process of just existing and experiencing, if you die and remain conscious, maybe you could say, I really want to experience being a manga character. So what happens is you create a time, a box, a life as a manga character. So that little manga character, everything would be real because that's your new reality. And then these little manga characters might have comics, and they might have comics about realistic. So whereas we've got these manga books with these like Japanesey characters, they might have realistic books with like humans in it. So then one of those dies and it says, next life I want to be one of these realistic characters. And then what happens then is that realistic character gets into manga. That one dies. See? But that wouldn't happen, because what would happen is when you go back to the main consciousness, your 1% goes back to that. It would already know that it is experienced being a manga character. Yeah. This is cool. This is very much like the DNA thing. This is like that DNA thing. Yeah. In other words, what this is these boxes here, the main consciousness is the big long bit of DNA which has got all the little lifetimes in it. So what happens there is, once you died, you would know that you've already been a manga character, because you would be able to. It would be like a memory on your big bit of DNA. Maybe that's it. So all that's happening is it keeps going until it's experienced everything. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. Well, what's happening now? This week's inspirational quote. I forgot to have a look for one. What can this week's inspirational quote... Hey, I know. So one of my favourite TV shows was the TV show Lost. And one of the things I loved about it was they started to introduce time travel with the character Desmond. And one of the quotes that I remember, it stuck with me, it did. And who was it that said it? I know it was. What's her name? I've forgotten her name. It was the old lady. There was this old lady, and she was like a time travelling guide sort of thing for Desmond. I can't remember her name. But she was cool, she was. What happened was, she said one of the episodes, she said she was with Desmond, they were like time travelling or something, and she said, that bloke's wearing red shoes, because a bloke walked past wearing red shoes, and then 5 seconds later, he got crushed or something, and all that was left was these red shoes. And Desmond said, you knew that was going to happen, didn't you? Why didn't you do something about it? And she said she could try and change it, but the universe has a way of course correcting. So in other words, no matter what happens, it's like it's going to happen, because it's almost like you're here to experience something, so no matter what you do, it's going to happen, because that's the whole point of you being here inside of this box. Yeah. But that's not this week's inspirational quote. This week's inspirational quote is, only fools are enslaved by time and space. She said that. I love it. Only fools are enslaved by time and space.